All right, GoldCast, we're going to start things off a little bit different this time. The last few weeks, Rudy has been posing to me a question, unscripted, unrehearsed, and we are going to do the exact same thing this week, only this time I will be asking the question to Rudy, and Rudy has no idea what I'm going to ask, and this is going to be a hot take, so buckle up. As Samuel Jackson said in the 1994 hit classic Jurassic Park, hold on to your butts. All right, so Rudy, here we go. During the regular season, this is a yes or no question. During the regular season, Trey Lance will start one or more games.
Ooh. That's a good one. That's a good one. Okay. I'm going to cheat my answer just a little bit. I'm going to say no, barring Jimmy's health. So if Jimmy stays healthy and he plays at the level he's capable of playing when he's healthy, we will not see Trey Lance start a game. He will play. Trey is going to play. Yes, I will yes that.
Right, that part is confirmed, so
Confirmed.
You're good there.
Yeah, for sure. But barring Jimmy's health. But if Jimmy goes down at any point this season, 100%, Trey, they're going to pull the trigger instantly.
This is
the GoldCast.
Boom! Welcome to another edition of the GoldCast. We are the voice of the Bay. I'm your host, Rudy Solis III, and with me is my brother, my co-host,
Raymond Solis the first, baby.
Boom! I was like, can he hold it? Still holding it. Still
B-Craw?
B-Craw in the building. The B-Craw pose. All right, Raymond, the stage is set. The final game of preseason is happening this week, and we play the Raiders. Pretty exciting matchup here. I'm very, very excited. August 29th, 2021. It's about to go down, Raymond. So before we even preview the game, I just want to ask you a quick question. How excited are you to just finally get this done?
Very excited because, who gives a rat's ass about the Raiders? Let's just get to week one because that's when everything counts.
That is when everything counts. And then let's talk about this other thing. How do you feel about the shortened preseason schedule? You know, we've always complained about that fourth game, about it being way too long. How do you feel that now that we've moved to 3 games, has this shortened new version of preseason that we're going to have going forward, has this alleviated the frustration of what has always felt like a very long preseason?
Yes and no. I'm a little wary about player health with the extra 17th game and the more stringent seeding rules this year. And that's putting pressure on teams to have starters in that late push to get the best seeding so that you can get some rest. I do not agree with having the second seed, with the second seed also not getting the bye. I think it's a bad move because you're putting players and teams in compromising positions to potentially, because look, if you're trying to get that seeding, then yeah, you're not going to want to rest your starters if, that the outcome of that game, like weeks 15, 16, or 17, may very well determine whether you get that bye via favorable seeding. So I think that, I'm a little cautious and wary about this 17-game regular season because I just think that we're in for more injuries than usual because we have an extra game now and more stringent seeding, as I said, that's going to put teams and players in, that's going to expose them more. They're going to be more exposed for injury, especially the stars. So I'm I'm not even cautiously optimistic about it. I'm concerned about it. So I'm just, I'm happy that the third preseason game is over, because this is more of a last chance for rookies and, people trying to get into a starting position versus second string or third string. And, it's going to be very uneventful in that regard as far as action and outcome is concerned. But I'm eager to get to the regular season because, up until those last 3 weeks, I think it's going to be pretty cool, just getting back to football and watching the Niners, potentially surge as they are expected to.
Okay, so let me yes and you as far as the long season is concerned. So for sure, I agree with that too. I am weary of the 17th game, even though technically it's still as many games as they've played. It's just now one counts versus one didn't, and most of the time they rested during that game, that 17th game. I also agree with you that there should be the reward for this 17th game that everyone has to play should be two first round buys for first and second. And I wouldn't be surprised if they find a way to do that, eventually bring that back, because you got to give something to that second seed, man. It's tough. Now there's only one seed that gets a bye, and that also heavily favors that number one seed, making it even more difficult. So we now have a longer season. We now lose a second seed bye, and I just think it makes things tougher in a way that's unnecessary in a sport that's already brutal as hell. So I agree with you on all that. As far as preseason is concerned, I've always loved the third preseason game. So this is maybe where I know but you a little bit. I've always loved the third preseason game. It's always been my favorite one. It's the one where the starters are out there for the longest. It's the time you get to see virtually almost everybody on the field taking their final snaps before the regular season. And I've always really enjoyed seeing the starters out there for a prolonged period of time during preseason week 3. So I'm very excited about that. That part I'm really pumped about. And then the great part is that after that, it's a wrap. We're done. No preseason game 4, which has always felt really pointless, which is the game I almost never watched. And the game I was always just kind of rolling my eyes going, oh my gosh, can we just get this over with already? So I am really excited that game is eradicated. And I'm very excited for this game because this is my favorite preseason game of the preseason. So that is how my thoughts on it. As far as let's move on to one more thing, and then we'll move into your preview, and then we can wrap it up. So let's talk about this. Historically, like if you talk to our father's generation, the unofficial fourth member of the GoldCast, Rudy Jr., they can't stand the Raiders. The Raiders were arguably at the peak of their powers, or always in the conversation during the 49ers dynasty, in the 70s leading into the 80s. The Raiders, and the Raiders had a couple of other runs in the late 90s, early 2000s. I mean, they've had moments where they've been pretty competitive, and they're always kind of hovering around the fringes of the 49ers dynasty. So our father, obviously San Francisco, Oakland, this is a very bitter rivalry. I don't have that same thing. I watched through the 80s and 90s. I came back in 2008 to the 49ers, and really as an adult have not really experienced the rivalry that the Raiders and Niners had during the 80s and 90s. Where do you stand on the Raiders and 49ers and this rivalry? Is this a thing for you? Do you hate them the way older generations do? Where do you sit?
I kind of alluded to this already by, saying, who gives a rat's ass about the Raiders. I don't hate the Raiders, but, they're kind of like insignificant to me, so like, it's not like I look forward to like A's and Giants matchups all the time. Those are probably some of the funnest games throughout the entire season for baseball. But I don't really care about Raiders and Niners matching up at all. The Niners are in a Super Bowl window right now. The Raiders are trying to figure out what they want to do because they're committed to John Gruden, and John Gruden, sometimes he looks good, sometimes he doesn't. And, I think some of that is offset by the fact that they still have pretty good drafting. They still drafted really good talent over the last years, Darren Waller, Josh Jacobs, to name a couple. But, they can't seem to figure out the defense. And, they're just like, I thought that when they were 12-4 and then Jack Del Rio fired his OC, and they've never really recovered from that. And I blame Jack Del Rio because his impatient, knee-jerk reaction to always fire the OC when things don't go well in the playoffs or even in regular season has come back to haunt him, and he lost his job because of that. He's still coaching, but he's not where he's a good coach outside of that impatient attitude he's got towards coordinators. And sometimes you just have to regroup and refine instead of just outright rewriting the script, which was his issue because he really derailed their progress when I thought that they were going to be a force to be reckoned with for years to come. But that really set him back. And I think the other thing that's also set him back too, and this might be controversial for Raiders fans, shout out to Dave Medina, is that I think John Gruden was perhaps not the best person to hire as the head coach. I like his mind as it relates to football, but in terms of coming back to the game after being gone for so long, you can clearly see that, there's a bit of a gap between where the league is now and how he perceives, how he wants to run the team. And, he just seems outmatched a lot of times. And sometimes he seems great and everyone seems to be dialed in. And then other times, they're just inconsistent. And so to me, there's no real rivalry between these two teams. Unless they miraculously meet in the Super Bowl and start something, there's no significant relation to either of these two teams, especially even more so now that they're in Las Vegas and we're still in the Bay Area. I know there's still lots of Bay Area fans out here that are not going to let that go, and kudos to them and the loyalty. But I mean, it's now even more irrelevant from a logistical standpoint, in addition to everything I just said. So yeah, it's not really much to me.
I completely agree. It's not really much to me either. They weren't really allowed to play each other basically for virtually this entire last decade. The games had gotten so rough that they would allow them to play during preseason, and that's about it. You can probably count on one hand how many regular season games they've had against each other in the last 11 to 12 years. I mean, they really, the NFL, rightfully so, was pretty concerned because this thing had started to reach, Giants, Dodgers, Red Sox, Yankees levels of violence at the stadiums. And so they basically wouldn't let us play them. So as an adult watching the 49ers as a young adult, through the last decade and going into this era, never really saw them. Still don't like Oakland teams. I think my kind of to send you about the Giants and A's. I think my hatred for the A's is probably greater than my hatred for the Raiders at this point. I don't like them. I've never been the biggest fan of Oakland teams. I was really happy when the Warriors moved to San Francisco. Like really, really, really happy. But in general, yeah, the Raiders isn't quite a thing for me either. It's like I will, from a loyalty fan base, be like, yeah, screw the Raiders, like Niners all day, of course, like that, absolutely. But I will be that way for any Bay Area team that isn't based in San Francisco. I mean, my loyalty is going to lie to San Francisco. Shout outs to the rest of the Bay. I know we have a lot of our entire fan base is in the entire Bay Area. So I'm not bashing the Bay. I love the Bay. I live, breathe, die for the Bay. But when it comes to the teams, obviously my loyalty is to San Francisco, the city I was born in. And I have no problem with any Bay Area person having loyalties to their geographical cities and whatever teams are closest to them. So shout outs to the Bay, not trying to bash the Bay. But yeah, I agree with you. The Raiders thing is not quite a thing for me. But all right, Raymond, let's wrap this up. Our final preseason game of the year. Let's get to it. Raymond, let's start, as always we do with these preview shows. Let's get to the injury report.
So the good news is Nick Bosa was suited up and full pads for practice today. His first since the injury on the Jet and during the Jets game. He's probably, I don't know what his workload will be. I think they're going to be cautious with him because they'd rather save him for the regular season. So we'll just have to monitor that. Take a look at reports tomorrow and Friday as well. Normally we do this on Thursdays, and the injury reports are actually ready by then. So we'll be a little bit behind in the schedule going forward with some of those updates. But Maurice Hurst, a defensive tackle, he was listed as doubtful and will miss at least a month with a high ankle sprain. So unfortunate, we lose some depth there. We know that some other guys were dealing with some issues, like Michael Kendricks, the linebacker. He was out at least a month with a toe issue. We know that before that, it was Aaron Banks, the guard, that was reported a couple days ago, and then we knew that Jawan Jennings wasn't going to play against the Chargers. The same with Trey Sherman. Trent Williams has been, they've been just keeping him out for most of this stuff. And but back to a positive note, Jaquiski Tartt has been activated from the PUP list, which stands for physically unable to perform. He's been dealing with a turf toe issue this offseason, which is why we've seen Talanoa Hufanga getting a lot of extra play time. But, considering how much he's flashed and how well he's looked so far in this preseason, Tart and Ward are obviously the better combo, but don't be surprised to see Hufanga in sub packages, throughout the season. So he's going to get a lot of playing action in addition to his contribution to special teams, but also look for him in actual sub packages playing his actual role. And that will be really nice to see too, because he has good instincts for the ball. He's only going to get better. He seems to have the drive. He was an outstanding college player. Speed was really the only thing that hurt him, that and a little bit of durability. But for the most part, he seems to be, progressing well as a player through the system, and Tart's injury only helps him get more experience. So it's a positive thing for him, and he's somebody that I really think will end up becoming a future starter, probably sooner rather than later, especially with the durability issues that Tart already has throughout his history. I'm not worried about Jimmy Ward. He's clearly finally conquered the hump, and I have full confidence in our Iron Man there. So he will be the staple strong safety going forward. But that's the news on Tart. So glad that he's back. They had to make a decision, because if they would have waited till August 31st, then anyone that was still on the PUP list would not be eligible to play, and they'd have to sit out for 6 weeks. So the Niners definitely wanted to activate him sooner, before that deadline. So good job on that, because we definitely need him going forward. Just hope that the toe issue doesn't linger throughout the season. Turf toes, I believe that's what took out Patrick Willis in his career. So it's a naggy injury. It really messes with you. So hopefully that's something that they can get a hold of before the season starts. But knowing his history, if I was a betting man, I would bet that this is going to come back and to bite him, and he's going to miss some time, and he's definitely not going to. Remember, he's only played like 10 games like once in his career. So Hufanga is going to get some playing time. Not only is he going to be involved in sub packages, but he's also going to get some starting action too.
I'm really excited for this game, mainly because I have a question for you.
Okay.
I want to see what your reaction is to this. As per the usual GoldCast Empire, when I have questions for Raymond, I do not prep him. I simply throw him on the air and just see what he's going to say. So, what happens? What happens if Jimmy continues what you described as a lackluster performance earlier in the week? What if he continues, and what if Trey Lance takes another leap the way he did last week? Do we see any change in who starts the first game against Detroit?
No, not. I over the course of a regular season, yes. But as far as week one is concerned, Jimmy's going to be there. In fact, Jimmy was asked this question, and he was asked about who would be the starter, and he said he thinks he knows who the starter is going to be, and gave his little signature smile, and I think that's a wink and a nod to the fact that he's Kyle's already told him behind closed doors that, hey, you're going to start week 1 Detroit. This is just a smokescreen for the press and also more so for Detroit. As far as we talked about last week in terms of game plan strategizing, that's just psychological gameplay that Kyle Shanahan plays, that a lot of NFL coaches play in the weeks leading up to the matchups, the actual regular season matchups. So Jimmy's going to be the starter. That's already been unconfirmed but confirmed is how I'll phrase that. But during the regular season, if he has slip-ups and multi-pick games, I think Kyle will absolutely pull him. He's pulled Nick Mullins. He's pulled Beathard. So Shanahan's not afraid to hey, take a seat. Doesn't mean he will lose the job outright, but he might lose that job for that game and have to come
Bill
back
Walsh
and regroup.
did that to Joe Montana.
He did, absolutely. So don't be afraid. If Jimmy has a multi-pick game and we're losing and, there doesn't seem to be any improvement in Jimmy's play over the course of a single game, then don't be surprised if he pulls him and sits him for that game and brings in Trey Lance. I'm not saying, but again, if he gets pulled, in order for him to lose the starting job, he has to lose multiple games. But if he has just a bad outing, Kyle Shanahan won't hesitate to, put Lance in, just to hey, hit the showers today. You don't have it in you. We're going to let Lance finish this one out and try to salvage some dignity, if not the win.
I like it. I agree. I don't really think there's a whole lot that Trey Lance can do. I love the leaps he's taken, and I think sitting out this season and continuing to evolve, coming in Taysom Hill style into funky packages and just getting used to the speed of the game will be really, really healthy for him. Now, Raymond, we're about to wrap up, but I want to let the GoldCast Empire know that our favorite episodes are about to drop next week, and that is our prediction episodes, where we sit and try to predict what's going to happen in every regular season game. This is probably, out of all the episodes we do every year, these are my favorites. We're going to split it up. So we're going to do the first half of the season in the first episode, and then our second episode, we're going to do the second half. So I am so pumped on these. How do you feel about our prediction episodes?
I love them. I mean, this year is going to be a little bit different because I'll be in Hawaii, so we have some logistical hurdles to iron out still. But I love kind of giving my overtly optimistic take on. I'm
usually very pessimistic, and you're very optimistic.
I think historically, I think the Niners have been one of the best teams in the NFL, according to my predictions for the last 5 years.
You did accurately predict a very aggressive run in 2019. I had them winning 5 games, and then you had them going on this 11 game, this 8 game win streak in the middle, which you actually you were almost completely right about. So kudos to you on that one. You pulled that one off pretty good. I thought 2019 was one of your more brilliant and one of your most accurate predictions.
That one did work out, and then we were optimistic for the 2020 revenge season, but then as it quickly spiraled out of control, I think me and Johnny Dell were thinking 6-10 was where we're going to end up, and that's where we ended up.
Yeah, you guys called that somewhere around week 4 and 5. You were like, This is a 6-10 season. It's a wrap. Yeah. But you also did say injury would be the greatest influencer of last season, and you were right about that. You did call that as well.
So that's and I think that's going to be the same, shadow that the Niners will potentially have to face this year. I think it applies to every team every year, but in the Niners case specifically, as we've looked at historically as well, through multiple regimes, I think that is still very much going to be one of the biggest hurdles to overcome. I don't want to give away too much for what, I'm going to share information with Rudy off air about the preview episode and, what my takes are. But I think that's something to obviously think about for this season as well, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, it's true. But what say you, GoldCast Empire? Is there anything Trey Lance can do to take the throne from Jimmy G in this final game? Let us know. Sound off in the comments. Go to youtube.com/thegoldcast and let us know. And don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you can get updates on every new GoldCast episode. And so concludes another edition of the GoldCast. We are the voice of the Bay. I'm your host, Rudy Solis III, and with me is my brother, my co-host,
Raymond Solis the first, baby.
Boom! We'll see you next time. Stay tuned and stay hyphy. Let's go.